So to use pie chart, you want to press Shift F3. If you have Optifine, go into Options, Video Settings, Other, and turn on Debug Profiler. And that will allow you to have the pie chart open whenever you press F3. So you don't have to press Shift F3. You can just open F3 and it'll be there. So when you're in this menu, you want to go to Game Render, then Level, and then Entities. So chests and mob spawners will fall under the category of block entities. So we will be looking at that section, which are the orange numbers. The actual pie chart is a reflection of the first column of numbers, and I would recommend just looking at the numbers instead of the actual chart, because the chart can get a little bit funky, and the numbers are just more accurate. So the first column will detect entities within 4 chunks of you in your FOV, no matter what your render distance is. So if I put down a chest, we'll see a little bit of a spike. It's only one chest, so it's not a huge spike, but we see it's around 8%, 9%, 10%. I'm looking at the left column, and you can also see it in the chart as well, a greater slice of that orange. And if you look away from it and it's out of your render distance, it'll go down a bit to like 5%, 4%, 6%. But when you're looking at it, you'll have a spike. The second column is the global column and can detect entities on your render distance to a lesser extent. So when chests and spawners are within 4 chunks, it will work just like the first column. So you see, if you're looking at the right column, it's 0.34%, 0.35%. When I'm looking away, it's now down to 0.14. And if I go 4 chunks away, we will see the chest deload. There it is. Once you're 4 chunks away, it's gone, and it will no longer pop up on the pie chart. It will no longer show a spike on the left column. However, you will still see a little bit of a spike in the right column. So in the absence of a chest, it would probably be around 0.10, 0.1% on the right, but right now it's 0.14, which is just a slight difference, but it can be used for the Nether and other triangulation purposes when the stronghold is really low or you're on high terrain. Another thing you want to keep in mind is that the graph won't function properly if there are no entities or mobs loaded in on your FOV. So if I'm looking up at the sky, you'll see the graph or the chart start to bug out, and the numbers will not be accurate. So if you're in the Nether, you're looking just straight into a wall or into lava or into the sky, it's not gonna be accurate, and you shouldn't think of this as like a spike. Okay, so now I'm going to show you an example of triangulation where there are no false positives, and it's just really easy to see where the spike is. So the first thing you want to do is throw your eye and make sure you get that angle. It's very important to stick to your angle when doing Piedar triangulation because you're essentially banking on running over the stronghold or running near the strongholds so you can find the spike. Because if you stray too far off the line, then you might not find the spike in the block entities. So just get the angle 110. Press 0 to go back to the screen you want to go to, which is this. And then I'm just running. And the quality is really bad right now, but I'm looking at this right hand column, the global column, and it is around 0.07, 0.09%, which means there is nothing. There are no chests, no spawners anywhere. So this will differ based on your render distance. I play on 11 render distance because that's the highest that I can play at without increasing world load times, but you guys should probably practice triangulation under different render distances, depending on what you normally use to determine like what is the number that means there's nothing. So for me, it's like 0.08 to 0.15 means there's nothing. But yeah, so I'll be running, just looking at the right-hand global column, and it's staying the same, just focusing on keeping that angle 110. And then over here, it starts to rise a little bit. You can't see it too well, but it goes up to 0.20%. But I know this isn't meaningful at all because there's a blacksmith here. So that spike is just because of the blacksmith. And I know that 0.2% is still not enough to be a stronghold. For me, strongholds are going to be usually between 0.4% and 0.8%, maybe even 0.9%, 1%. But yeah, I know this is just blacksmith, nothing to worry about. Keep running. There's still no massive spike. Just keep sticking to my angle, go around this hill. And then about here, we can see it start to climb pretty rapidly. My right-hand column goes up to 0.4%, 0.5%. And that is about the range where I know there is something, either a dungeon, a mineshaft, or a stronghold. But this looks really good for a stronghold because it is not super high to the point where dungeons are. Dungeons, for whatever reason, they'll go up to like 1% sometimes. And what I do here now is I'm spamming it open and close to determine if this is a dungeon or not. So if you have a dungeon, then you're only going to see a spike in like one very small area. So I'm just looking around to make sure that, oh, maybe there's more stronghold over here, so there's still a spike here. There's like a spike everywhere here, which means it's probably a stronghold or a mineshaft, most likely a stronghold, since we're in the ring. But I know we're close, and I'm just going to run a bit further and then throw my eye, expecting a large angle change, because I know we are probably close to the portal room now. So I throw an eye, goes way off to the right, and I'm just going to draw my line. Again, you can still see both in the chart, which is the left column, and the right column, there is a spike. So we know we're on top of the stronghold. I just draw my line, and I can kind of guess that I wasn't following my line perfectly, but also my line was not bad either from the beginning. So I just draw it out a bit, not too far, and then go off to the right because we're not entirely sure where my original line was. So I just give myself some leeway, throw it, and get a really nice angle back so you can just pinpoint that really well and dig down. But yeah, that's just an example of a perfect three-eye triangulation where there are no false positives and it's very easy. Okay, now I'm going to give you an example of what a dungeon will look like. So if we open the pie graph, we will see a spike of 0.63 on the right column, which means there is definitely something here. But if we start looking around a bit, start opening and closing, we'll see it quickly drops off. Right now it's 0.10, which means there's nothing. Behind us, there's also nothing. Nothing over here, really. But once we get looking in this range, we have something. And this really fast drop-off indicates a dungeon because strongholds are generally very large. They have library chests, altar chests, and the portal room spawner all spread out over a large area. And so you will not usually see something like this. So if you're running and you see this, you should always check first to see if this is a dungeon or not, because you don't want to be wasting eyes. So you'll check and be like, oh, yeah, looks like this is a dungeon, just going to keep running. And most of the time, you'll be right. And if we just check, down here, you'll see the spawner and the two chests right there. All three of those are block entities, and they're centralized in one area, which is not typical in strongholds. Okay, we can also go to another example where we have multiple dungeons. And this is when you get a really high spike. So we have 1.3 on the right. And you will rarely see something like 1.3 for a stronghold. 1.8 right now, even. You can get numbers these high for a stronghold, but you should be skeptical if you are running and you find something like this. So I would do that check, run around, or just look around while you're running, and it quickly drops off 0.17 here. Nothing behind us. It's just in this region. There's a very high count. So I would assume that this is a dungeon. You can throw an eye to be safe, or you can just know that this is probably multiple dungeons. So if we go down, check, we see one dungeon over there, one dungeon below us, and another one way out there. I don't know if it looks like the chests aren't loaded, but the spawner is. But yeah, you can have really high numbers that will often indicate dungeons, so just be careful of that for false positives. Piedar is also a very useful tool for nether resetting. So let's say I enter the nether. I'm gonna pull up my Piedar. It takes a while for the chunks to load, so I'd recommend in this time maybe crafting your tower materials or whatever you need to craft right here. And then we see at the top, chunks have finished loading. And I'm looking at my pie chart, and it's around 0.03 in the global column. So before we looked at both columns, but in the nether, you pretty much only care about the second column because fortresses are going to be more than 4 chunks away from you if you can't see them, just inherently. So you're going to be looking, and you can open and close it a bunch of times looking around, but I found that even if you're looking straight down or in one spot, if it's below a certain threshold, there's no fortress in your render distance. So I have it set to 11 chunks, and that means there's no fortress in 11 chunks for me, which is just an instant reset. So instead of spending time like running around here, looking down there, I will just instantly reset this world because I know there's nothing nearby. So if you play on different render distances, you should test to see what worlds look like if there is no fortress. So for me, it's like 0.05 and under, there's essentially no fortress in your render distance. Now I will show you on with one fortress. So I hop in, it's a pretty enclosed spawn. So I pull it up and we can see it's already at 0.05, 0.06, the chunks haven't even finished loading. But now they're done and we see it's around 0.07. So that tells me that there is a fortress. It's relatively far, but there still is one 11 chunks away from me. And so now I will look around briefly and I'll see it's spiking around here. It's 0.11. And over here, 0.07, 0.08, not as high as this direction. So I'm going to try and find my way over there. If you had no idea, if you did not use Piedar, you would probably go this way and look for a fortress. But if you knew that there's something in this direction, you would go around the corner, keep running, and there's the fortress over here. So yeah, you can see the spawner in the distance. And right here, you can see a massive spike because we're probably over the chest section right now. So we're within 4 chunks of a chest. So you'll see a spike in the actual chart itself, as well as the second global column, which is now at 0.4%. You can also use Piedar to find the blaze spawner in the good part of the fortress. So let's say I just pillared up into the good part of the fortress, just somewhere. I can pull it up and look in both directions. Over here, there is basically nothing, 0.08 in the global column, whereas this side, you can see a massive spike, 0.7. So this is a perfect example of when you can use Piedar to help you. So obviously you don't want to go this way. If we just check, you end up going this way, you'll just hit dead ends. So logically, you see a spike this way, continue this way. But now Piedar becomes a bit less helpful. It's only helpful in some situations because it will detect chests, and at a certain point it's just super messy. It's not that accurate for finding exactly where spawners are, but it can help you find where spawners are not. So you just see a lot of spikes this way. Just choose a direction. There's something up there, but there's also a spawner here. So it's not always going to be helpful, but in some situations, like you saw, you can figure out where not to go in a fortress.